Good morning. We have a number of mayors who will be introduced later on, as well as advocates in regards to what we see as gun violence all across America. And it's truly a national disgrace. I want to thank all the elected officials for having the political courage of standing up against the gun lobby, not only here, but throughout the country. Mayors from all parts of this country that have the political courage, and this issue is off the radar screen in Washington, but is on the radar screen continually on a daily basis in America. In 1 year, an average, more than 100,000 people in America are shot or killed with a gun. Americans of all backgrounds in every part of our nation, whether large cities or small cities, urban or rural, needlessly lose their lives because guns are too easily available in our society. On college campuses, in malls, on streets, in homes across our nation, gun violence has tragically ended the lives of people who were just going about their everyday lives. The victims are the mothers and fathers, the brothers and sisters, and all of our children. Last year, 82% of all Chicago homicides were committed with a gun. Just this week in Virginia, 8 people were killed by gun violence, the worst mass shooting there since Virginia Tech in 2007. Gun violence has challenged the safety of our communities, along with the security of law enforcement personnel. And there is a tremendous health care cost associated with gun violence as well. Every year, for many years, I and many of the people behind me and others gathered here today have enacted common sense gun laws in our cities and towns and supported balanced gun reform proposals in all our state capitals and in Washington, D.C. Many different polls show that people, including gun owners, support laws that protect the rights of law-abiding citizens to purchase a gun, but also help us end the flood of weapons onto our streets, into our communities, into many homes. These laws reflect the decisions of state and local officials who have the total responsibility to protect public safety and health, and more importantly, the will of people who elected them. Since the post-Civil War days, the rights of cities and states to put these laws in place have been accepted by our nation and the U.S. Supreme Court. Now that right is in jeopardy. In 2008, the Illinois State Rifle Association, with support from the National Rifle Association and other gun advocates, decided to challenge a long-standing principle by filing a lawsuit against the city of Chicago. And for many years, the city of Chicago has had a strong handgun laws in place. The gun industry challenges to our handgun laws have already been dismissed by 2 federal courts, and now they're taking their case to the U.S. Supreme Court. This summer, the court would decide whether Chicago's gun laws are constitutional. The case could affect or open the door to countless and needless legal challenges to local and state gun laws all across this great country. Today, we stand on behalf of the people of Chicago and the United States who have been victims of gun violence, on behalf of their families and the loved ones, and on behalf of all those who believe Chicago's current gun law is constitutional. As you can see from the representatives here today, many people agree with that, and other gun laws in place around the nation are the right thing for the safety of the country and our people. Already, 17 friends of the court briefs, representing more than 150 individuals and organizations, have filed with the U.S. Supreme Court in support of our position. We strongly believe it is the right of cities and states to enact strict but balanced gun laws, such as the ones we're talking about today, to keep their residents safe. Remember, the issue is whether local governments can enact handgun laws and other measures that they believe are needed to keep their communities free from violence. In our ongoing efforts, we will never sway from our commitment to support the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, while at the same time making our case that local communities have the power to enact gun laws to protect their own communities. In the face of strong opposition from the NRA and other gun extremists, we will continue to advocate for the rights of cities to regulate guns and to coordinate efforts with other cities that share our position. Does anyone really believe that the founders of our nations envisioned that guns and illegal weapons would flood our streets and be used to kill our children and average citizens? Of course not. the ability to enact reasonable gun laws in our city, laws that balance the need to protect the rights of gun owners with the necessity of reducing the threat of gun violence is a right that we must retain. This fight is the right thing to do for the residents of our cities and our nation. Now I'd like to introduce the Mayor of Rochester, Robert Duffy, who's chairman of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Public Safety and Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Bob Duffy. I'm the mayor of Rochester, New York. As the mayor mentioned, I'm the chair of the Criminal and Social Justice Committee here for the conference. I was also a former police chief before running for mayor, and I want to first of all state I fully support Mayor Daley's position and Chicago's position on this case. Chicago deserves the right to set the tone and to establish laws that protect its citizens. And I would dare say that those that oppose this legislation and oppose Chicago's right to do so have never been out in a street corner at 3 o'clock in the morning with a 15-year-old child shot to death and had to face mom or dad or family members. It's one of the most powerful scenes that anyone could imagine, and those that somehow insulate themselves away from that pain are trying to stop a mayor from making decisions in his city that will keep his citizens safe. In my last career, the one thing that I had to say as a chief in New York State, I looked at Chicago and what they had done over the years through Mayor Daley's administration. And while New York City garnered most of the headlines nationally for crime reductions, Chicago has quietly gone about amassing, I think, one of the best public safety records there is in this nation, and that's credit to Mayor Daley and his team. No one knows better than Mayor Daley in terms of what is best for his city. And in closing, when you look at federal mandates that blanketly stop mayors and cities from making decisions such as this, it is unfair and it is wrong. This is a decision that should be up to the mayors and the cities to make. It should not be something that would be preempted federally. It is not something that I see that applies to be stopped by federal law. It is important that Chicago has the right to keep this ban in place, and I would hope that those that oppose it would see the benefit of what Mayor Daley is doing here and support him. So thank you.
Our next speaker is Gavin Newsom, Mayor of San Francisco, who's been at the forefront dealing with this issue continually. He's one of the leaders nationwide. Gavin?
Thanks, Mayor. And let me just add my voice in support of Mayor Daley's efforts and just put this in context, at least from our perspective out in San Francisco. There's a lot riding on Mayor Daley's efforts. That's why we joined with an amicus brief, these other cities and other mayors in support. We have 3 laws that are pending the determination and outcome of this decision. It was Chicago and San Francisco that were the target of the National Rifle Association's efforts and assault coming post-2008 in the Supreme Court decision. A consequence of that decision, we had to give up our, we thought, common sense gun restrictions in public housing. They were successful in one other instance, watering down some other common sense gun control laws. And now we have 3 specific laws, not least of which one that says it should be illegal to discharge firearms in the city and county of San Francisco. Fairly, from my perspective, pretty much common sense. Another one that says you shouldn't have cop-killing bullets sold in the city and county of San Francisco. And the third was, well, if you're going to have a gun, just have it trigger locked or in storage if it's not on your person. It doesn't seem to me onerous and extraordinary measures, and they're overwhelmingly supported, incidentally, by our district attorney, by our law enforcement officials, by every elected official, and by the overwhelming majority of our citizens. So the whole idea here is the right of self-determination. The whole idea of empowering municipalities and states. The principles, ironically, that conservatives so often try to advance, but then in the practice tend to, well, fight against. And so in this case, there's a lot riding on the case now pending in front of the Supreme Court. And I just again want to thank Mayor Daley and all the mayors for standing strong on this in a bipartisan way. We are on the front lines, and I think the opportunity and right of self-determination should be afforded those that are ultimately accountable to the safety people they represent.
Also, the mayor of Philadelphia, Mike Nutter, who knows the issue on a personal basis in the sense that his city's done a tremendous job reducing the violence, and he understands what gun violence can take place in his city and the loss of life, and to see the families and victims, and you see the personal side of gun violence in America. Mike?
Mayor Daley, thank you, and thank you all the other mayors. One of the proudest moments of my time as mayor of Philadelphia is shortly after our Philadelphia City Council passed 5 reasonable gun law measures in Philadelphia, and of course I signed them. On my 100th day in office, I was sued by the NRA. It's one of the proudest moments of my public service. We fought those cases at the local level and won at the Common Police Court and also in Commonwealth Court. And these were gun measures, as Mayor Newsom talks about, relatively understandable things like lost and stolen provisions. If you lose your weapon or if it is somehow stolen, we would require you to report it. The NRA went after that. Assault weapons and a variety of other matters. There's no reason to have an M16 in an urban environment. There are no deer to be shot, at least in most areas of the city. And so the NRA is out of control and cannot seem to understand the daily death and carnage that takes place all across the United States of America. Mayor Daley is absolutely correct. When you look at the statistics, for African-American males aged 15 to 44, the #1 cause of death in Philadelphia is homicide, not disease, homicide. Much like Mayor Daley laid out, upwards of 80+% of all the murders in Philadelphia are committed with a handgun. This is not about the Second Amendment. I strongly support the Second Amendment, but I believe I also have a First Amendment right not to be shot. And so mayors have to take these kinds of responsibilities. When someone is injured in our cities, there's no state 911 number to call. There's no federal 911 number to call. No one calls the governor when someone is murdered in Philadelphia or Chicago or San Francisco or any of these other cities around. No one is going to call the President of the United States. They call mayors. We get a report every night and every morning for what happened in the course of the past day. It is our responsibility. Some people talk about states' rights. The cities have rights as well. And it is our responsibility to make sure that our citizens are safe and exercise a good judgment that they elected us to do in the first place. We are strongly supporting Mayor Daley and the City of Chicago. Thank you.
Next mayor is Michael Coleman, City of Columbus, Ohio. He's been in the forefront for many years dealing with this issue. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor Daley. First, I want to let you know that we all stand behind you in this effort because this is about home rule and local control and mayors understanding what it takes to keep their citizens safe. The City of Columbus as well filed an amicus curiae brief in support of your cause, and we think it's an important cause for the City of Chicago, but for millions of Americans that live in cities all over our country. In the City of Columbus, we adopted an assault weapons ban. And about that time we adopted it, the NRA had selected the City of Columbus for its national convention. And they had the nerve to say that if we adopted this assault weapons ban, that they would move their convention elsewhere. We adopted the assault weapons ban and said, "You've just made our day." And they did leave. They went to another city. The fact of the matter is, subsequently, the state of Ohio passed a bill that said no city in the state can now have assault weapons bans or even control weapons in their own city. I don't get it. We're trying to save lives. We're trying to save people, save our cities. But these weapons of mass destruction continue to be used in all of our cities. It needs to stop. It needs to stop now. We're supporting you, Mayor, and we're here for the fight. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Sulan Poland, Associate Executive Director of Public Affairs and Advocacy of the American Public Health Association. Doctor.
The American Public Health Association is the oldest and most diverse organization of public health professionals in the world. We've been on record as supporting restrictions on guns, specifically handguns, for more than 40 years. The data are clear. With almost 31,000 deaths and more than 78,000 non-fatal shootings that are serious enough to require the victim to go to the hospital for treatment, there is no other conclusion than the fact that this is a significant public health problem. There is a powerful and irrefutable link between guns and increased risk of homicide, suicide, and fatal accidental shootings, especially for those people who live in a home with guns. Guns pose particular risk to children and to women. And the research suggests that statutes challenged in this case may prevent a substantial number of firearm deaths and injuries. We wouldn't be doing our job protecting the public's health and preventing injury and death if we didn't support this case. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today and to join with these brave mayors and other colleagues and partners in support of safer communities.
Thank you, Susan. Next speaker is Jennifer White, attorney for Legal Programs, Family Violence, and Prevention Fund.
Good morning. As the mayor said, I am attorney for legal programs at the Family Violence Prevention Fund. We are a 30-year-old organization dedicated to preventing domestic, dating, and sexual violence and helping victims. We joined with other nonprofit public interest groups in an amicus brief to the United States Supreme Court in McDonald versus Chicago because guns and domestic violence are a lethal combination that injure or kill women in this country every day. Few people in this region can forget the tragedy endured by Lisa Spicknell, a mother and now an advocate for victims of abuse in Maryland. Several years ago, Lisa's husband was subject to a protection order that should have prevented him from obtaining a firearm. But he was able to procure one due to a clerical error. With that gun, he shot and killed their 2 children. Sadly, stories like Lisa's happen every day in this country. Congress has recognized the uniquely potent and lethal threat that access to firearms create for victims of domestic and sexual violence and stalking. To try to mitigate that threat, the Violence Against Women Act and the Gun Control Act include provisions that prohibit perpetrators who are subject to qualifying protection orders or who have been convicted of misdemeanor crimes of domestic violence to possess firearms. Those provisions are groundbreaking and life-saving, but they are not enough. The reality is, even without clerical errors such as what occurred with Lisa Spicknell's situation, a large majority of victims never access the justice system, never report the crime, and therefore never find haven from threats, severe injury, or death at the hands of batterers with access to firearms. According to Bureau of Justice statistics, in the United States, on average, 4 women are murdered each day by current or former husbands or boyfriends. Firearms are the most common weapon used in intimate partner homicides. Most women who are killed by their husbands or ex-husbands are killed by guns. Guns also are frequently used to intimidate and terrorize victims of domestic violence. And research shows that the mere presence of a firearm or access to one increases fatality rates in abusive relationships. Firearms require little preparation or effort, and in just a moment, all can be lost. We need to strengthen our gun laws and support the efforts of cities like Chicago to protect its citizens, to enhance safety for victims of domestic and sexual violence and children, and to keep lethal weapons out of the hands of batterers. That is why the Family Violence Prevention Fund is asking the United States Supreme Court to uphold Chicago's ban on handguns. Women's lives are at stake in this case. We urge the court to let America's cities give victims of domestic and sexual violence the protection they so urgently need. Thank you.
I'd like to have other mayors come up who have the political courage who, over many, many years, to fight the National Rifle Association. And the courage to make the decisions that are important to deal with violence in their community. David, Chris, I'd like each one of them come up and
Thank you. I stand strongly behind the City of Chicago and the effort of Mayor Daley to preserve his right as the mayor of that city to promote and enact reasonable gun safety legislation, and in this case, a handgun ban. It's very important, although the argument that's made against this frequently is, there's a Second Amendment right. we also have the right and the responsibility to ensure that a grandmother who's on the porch on a summer evening has the ability to enjoy an evening with her grandchild free from gun violence. That's also a constitutional right that we have a responsibility to protect. Mayors have a responsibility. One of our most important responsibilities is to protect the health and well-being of our communities and to free and protect our residents from the scourge of gun violence. And we ought to have the right to use all the tools necessary to fulfill that obligation. And I stand strongly behind the City of Chicago and this great mayor, and thank him for his leadership.
Thanks, Mayor Daley. When I signed on with Mayor Daley and Mayor Menino and others on the Coalition Against Illegal Guns, my name appears. I get postcards in the mail from NRA subscribers who say, why do you do this? So I call everybody back with these postcards, and I say, do you have an urban assault weapon? And they say, no. I say, you have a rifle? They say, no. I said, then why are you opposed to the mayor of Elizabeth protecting the citizens of our community by keeping these guns off our streets? And most of the people who send me these little postcards don't have an answer. And I think that kind of sums it up from the mayor's position, that the NRA is using people that may not even own guns just to go after mayors to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong and you're against the Second Amendment. And what Mayor Daley said is, we're not against the Second Amendment. We're against illegal guns and guns on our streets in order to protect our citizens.
Ron?
Mayor Daley and my distinguished colleagues and participants in the press conference, you've all said everything that needs to be said, and you've said it pointedly, articulately, and eloquently. I therefore simply associate myself with all of your remarks and conclude by saying, Mayor Daley, thank you very much for your stance, and along with my distinguished colleagues, I stand without equivocation or reservation with you in this very fundamental matter. Thank you.
The city of Evanston, Illinois is not only Mayor Daley's neighbor, but we share the same problems and we have the absolute same solutions. We follow Mayor Daley's leadership on gun control because he's been right on this issue for many years. We do not have a problem with dead bodies of deer that are shot with handguns in Evanston, Illinois. We have young people who are killed by handguns in Evanston, Illinois. So I believe that we have the right to determine what will keep our young people safe, and therefore we completely support Mayor Daley's position and thank him very much for his leadership.
I'm Mayor Masters, the mayor of Riviera Beach, which is next door to West Palm Beach in Florida. We fully support Mayor Daley taking the leadership in this great effort. I literally wear two hats, as you can see. I'm the mayor of the city. I'm also the bishop of the New Macedonia Baptist Church. I've been to those scenes where 15-year-olds have been killed by a 13-year-old. So anything that we could do to support the mayor's efforts, we're going to do it in Riviera Beach. Thank you very much.
I want to thank all the mayors and all those who are participating in our press conference and amicus briefs as well. But most importantly, we're here to really educate the public about the responsibilities that local officials have in regards to prevention of violence in our community. And this is not only a gun issue, but it's a health issue. And they're debating the health care bill down here in the last 4 or 5 months. And this is part of it because we read about those that have been killed, but we never read about those who have been seriously injured. Traumatic injuries, psychologically and physically, those are discarded. And to me, this is all about protection of our people. And when you talk about social issues, the issue was alive in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and it disappeared because people want to make sure they can get reelected, and so they run away from hard and difficult issues such as this. It's really unfortunate when you see in our country how many people and how many presidents have been killed and shot, and how many of our citizens have been killed and shot over many, many years. The issue always comes to me about smoking in America. America rose up about smoking in all places, and we hope to, how do we educate the people about gun violence and what gun violence is doing on a daily basis? And if America rose up against smoking, why can't we have America rise up about gun violence that are in our homes, in our communities, and it doesn't matter where you live. And it's about time that we use some common sense. And I want to thank all these mayors for having great leadership qualities. This is about real leadership, about standing up to the National Rifle Association. Thank you. Thank you.